Welcome to the Travel Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Vandenberg. On our show, I interview and connect with leaders across travel, hospitality, and tourism. We talk leadership in our industry, what has shaped them, the successes, failures, and everything in between. On today's show, I'm speaking with Dylan Beaumont, General Manager of the Fairfield Inn & Suites in Eugene, Oregon. Before we start, I want to let you know about the Travel Leader community. Every month, I'll be gathering a group of travel leaders to continue the conversation about leadership. This is a group for travel leaders looking to share, reflect, and grow their leadership competencies with the support of myself as a trained coach. Learn more at www.thetravelleadercoach.com. And with that, I'd like to welcome our guest today, Dylan Beaumont. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So we were just talking about how I you came on my radar. You've been on some other podcasts, and I really love to hear how you lead. And today I'd really would like to get into who you are as a leader. And that's kind of the direction of our conversation. So just to get us started, could you give an introduction of yourself and particularly what's the red thread throughout your career?
Yeah, so I'm 23 years in the hospitality industry. I've worked economy, mid-scale, and luxury hotels, and currently am general manager of a select property, the Fairfield by Marriott in Eugene, Oregon. What's been common for me in whatever hotel I've been set in is I've always wanted to contribute. I've always wanted to be the type of worker the ownership knew their investment was safe with. And I always wanted to be somebody who stood out in a positive way. I didn't ever want to be somebody who, when somebody comes by and says, "Are you working hard or hardly working?" there was only one answer for me ever. And it was never hardly working. Because I always wanted to make a difference. And each day I'd say, I want to make a fraction of a percentage difference in my workplace if I can. So I'd want to leave it better than I walked in. Even if it wasn't like the most glamorous job, I wanted to be a difference maker.
Yeah. Well, that relates to something else I was going to ask you right away, which is, what is that impact that you want to make every day?
When it's in my workplace, I want to make sure that if a guest is coming in, for example, I want them to feel like it's a safe place, a clean place, a reliable place to stay. And if they don't even associate with me, they know that the people they associate with that I supervise are going to take care of them. That's what I aim for. And that's in any job I'm at. I want to make sure that the product stands for itself and it's respectable, and it's not something where a guest comes in and they leave and leave that horrible review of all these things that went wrong. I really never want to see that as the end result. If I can make sure there's a difference to be made during a stay, I really want to make sure that difference happens.
Yes. Something I get the feeling and sense of with you, Dylan, also from listening to your other podcast recordings, is that attitude also applies when you're leading your team. What's true about that?
I'm so fortunate, though. My team, the team I have now, workers I've led in the past, I've had such blessings of really, really good workers. And, we've had the rough spots in between. But when you get like fellow leaders and fellow future leaders that join your team, and you work alongside them and you polish what you can and you help reinforce those things that are already in the worker, and they end up being a leader alongside you, it's so much less of a burden for you. I don't have to worry about my houseman. He's incredible. I don't have to worry about my engineer. He's incredible. I don't have to worry about my housekeeping department. They absolutely deliver day in and day out. I couldn't do these things alone. So I'm so proud that they're here to do those things. And I'm happy to encourage them. I'm happy to learn from them. I geek out about things in hospitality of like, there's a new cleaner that works. I want to hear about it. If there's, we're using a new tool and it's made my engineer's life easier, I want to hear about it. I love the before and after work of the rug doctor and the pressure washer. It's I will look at those pictures my engineer brings me all day long. It's a blessing to have this team around me. It really is, and
That's
I
awesome.
really hope they feel the encouragement from me, but also I hope that they feel like day in and day out they have me here. Like whether I'm at home, I'm accessible by phone. If I'm here in my office, unless I'm doing something super incredibly sensitive, my door is not locked. My door might be closed, but I'm not going to lock my door on them. And I'm going to take their calls. I've had a lot of times in hospitality where my MODs have been on their own time, completely unreachable. And then I've
Yeah.
had times where managers have called and said, well, I've reached out to my managers, and they've said those calls were bad calls. I'll never be that person. I'm not going to shame my workers for reaching out to me. It could be a bad call or not, but something led them, maybe the need for reassurance or second guessing, but something led them to call me. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't feel like they need to be shamed, and I don't feel like they need to regret calling me. Because that's
Right.
not leadership. That's not
Yeah.
hospitality.
What it sounds like to me is that you implicitly, with the people that work with you, that you give them this trust that they know what they're doing, and this respect, and that really you're providing this container of support around them to, be when they do have an issue and they do need that support, that you are there for them. But on
Absolutely.
a day-to-day basis, your expectation and their performance really just reinforces that they are capable beings and they can do their job.
Yeah, definitely. And then I have the real great benefit of when my workers have put in enough years and they're very seasoned that I can sleep in the morning. And usually that worker doesn't need everything goes according to plan and my phone doesn't ring. That's a blessing too. So
Yes.
once they've been developed and they've put their time in and they get to a point where I can trust them with everything that's going to happen, that is really nice.
Yes. Yeah. For sure. You need a break once in a while, right?
Yeah, there's those weekend mornings where I know my weekend staff has got it, and usually off season, where I'll get those extra few hours of sleep, and that's really cool. I like
Yeah.
when everything's humming and working extremely well. I like to come in just on the weekends during lunchtime, meet with each department, and go home. And that is the nicest for me. Just knowing that, okay,
Yeah.
I got to talk to everybody, everything's good, I'm still there and reachable, but I'm gonna let you guys have it.
Yeah. I'm hearing this feeling of gratitude for those moments when you can really depend on your team. What
Yeah, it,
what role what
it
role
is
does
nice.
gratitude play for you?
It is for me. It is nice to have them here and to see them develop and be able to step aside. And that for me, that break when we know operations is hard and operations can be unforgiving. So if they've got to the point where they allow me to take a bit of my life back, I'm very appreciative of that. And
Yeah.
I want to let them know that as often as I can. Is when you're in initial management, you always think that you need to be loud and discipline needs to be involved. I think over time, what you really realize is you need to nurture your workers and you need to talk to your workers because you want to build them up to that point where you can trust them and you can take time off. But if you're loud and you're incorporating discipline as a primary motivator, that's only going to lead to resignations and turnover, and that will not give you your free life, your free time back. You're only going to cost yourself.
Such a key point. I think so many, I started that way. I remember when I first took over our hotel, and I felt like I was constantly having to tell people what the rules were. And one of the first things I did was we didn't have an employee manual. This is my family's hotel, and there was no employee manual. So I thought, well, if I make an employee manual and I write down the rules and I give it to them and have them sign it, then everything's going to be okay. So, and that doesn't work. That doesn't work. Not a way to lead, but I learned from that for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how do you think your team would describe you as a leader?
I would really hope that my availability, which I take a lot of pride in, is being available to my staff. I hope that'd be a primary thing that they would mention, is that I'm reliable, I'm reachable, and there's any time they reach me, if I feel bad, if I nod off for like a 45 minutes and I miss a call, I feel bad that I didn't catch that call. That's just who I
Yeah.
am. I want to be supportive of them, and I hope that reflects. And I also have learned, the longer I manage, the more I realize it's good to take time to just have those little conversations with your employees and learn who they are and learn what makes them tick, because everyone's different. Everyone is motivated differently and trained differently and learns differently. And the more I manage, the more I learn that there's no one size fits all when it comes to employee relations. You need to actually spend time working with your workers and finding out what motivates each one. Because you're not going to have like a pizza party and everyone walks away feeling elated and the workplace is at 100 in terms of motivation. You gotta to see what works for each worker.
Yes. Yes. I think what it sounds like in your case, that idea of availability, it's not just that someone can come to your office and tell you when there's an issue, but it's also that you're being very proactive about connecting with them. And it really, from what you were just saying, availability isn't just, it has to be meaningful. It's not just about creating time, but being genuinely interested in connecting with that employee, whether they're telling you about their dog or, they're telling you about that new machine that's going to make their work a lot easier, and you being there to listen and getting really excited about that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for
So
me,
I
I
yeah.
think also, sorry to cut you off.
No, no,
Um,
no, go ahead.
I think also it helps in your relating to that employee in the future. So if you have discipline that comes up, or you have a serious discussion, before that serious discussion, you've had a series of productive discussions with that employee. You've been talking to them about their job performance, so they're going to know this isn't the only feedback you're getting. So it's not, you don't want them to take it to heart as the only feedback about their job, the only
Yes.
interaction they have with their manager. It's one of many interactions they have with their manager. So they know, well, I'm not, you don't want them to think I'm not valued, or my manager only cares to talk to me when I do something wrong. That would be terrible. So in
Yes.
my mindset, I want to spend the time with the workers, and then when if it does come around that I need to have a serious discussion with them, they'll know this isn't our primary motivation in having discussions with you. It's not our only direction with you. We also want to
Right.
encourage you. We also want to relate to you. But yes, there's on occasion there's going to be a time where we have to talk about something that occurred that came
Yes. There's a great analogy to that, that you just reminded me of, that I read in a management book once. And it's like making deposits in a bank, that you have to make a lot of positive deposits before you can make withdrawals. And that,
That's well
that
said.
yeah, like negative feedback is like making a withdrawal from the bank, and you can't go into the red.
And
So
sometimes
you
I need to
yeah.
investigate the circumstances of a negative happening, because sometimes there's more to the story than it appears. I'll give an example. Recently, I had some members who had their elite status go down. and so their benefits changed. So they were complaining to me, writing me letters of grievances about the worker not presenting them with their status benefits. Well, actually, their status changed, so the worker didn't do anything incorrect, but she could have then explained what transpired.
Right.
So when I met with that worker, I said, I want you to know two things. First off, you did nothing wrong, and here's how this happened.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want anything to be taken to heart because I know that this negative review would be seen, but at the same
Right.
time, I didn't want it to be something that was deconstructing all the positive work we put in because the
Right.
circumstances mattered.
Yes. Yeah. And you raise another good point that, one mistake that I've made in the past is something happens, we get a bad review, and my emotional reaction gets the better of me, and then I'll be like, "What did you do?" And over time, I learned after a few of these cases that, like you said, there's so much more behind the issue that happened. And really, I have to ask questions first and
Yeah,
not make assumptions
exactly.
and really get to the root of the problem, because more than likely there's two sides to every story and there's something deeper there, and it's something to be seen. Those moments are moments that we can learn from and we can grow. It doesn't have to be a bad thing.
And sometimes, if you look into it, it ends up being holding no water to begin with. I had a
Right.
case which I had a lobby full of golf gentlemen, and they were all enjoying conversation with each other. And when it came time for reviews, one of them said, the worker didn't take time to relate to us. And then so I was actually within the time I had footage still banked, and I got a surveillance camera. I checked it out. I'm like, well, what happened between my worker and this whole group? Well, the whole group was drinking and butting up, and the worker had no opportunity to relate to them. And I was
Right.
like, well, you guys,
Yeah.
was it not good enough that you were relating to each other for 15 minutes? And what was she supposed to do? Say, gentlemen, pay attention to me.
Right. Yeah, that would be weird.
And so
Then you
I
would
guess
get
this. Go ahead.
then you would get a review about that. Well, the
Right.
the the employee was super awkward.
Right. So I felt so bad for her because they're saying, well, she took no time to bond with us. I'm like, you're bonding with each other. How dare. Take her
Right.
golfing then if you want, if you're going to sit
Yeah.
here writing criticism.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So let's rewind a little bit back
Yep.
into your early days. So when did you first know that you were a leader?
So I was first tabbed to be a leader in my mid 20s in a luxury resort in California, in Shell Beach, California. And I had the responsibilities, and I definitely stepped up and fulfilled the role, but I really wasn't there yet. There's learning to be done, and I took care of all the things I needed to take care of. But there's so much. If you could go back in time, of course, all these things
Mm-hmm.
we would do better with the
Mm-hmm.
knowledge we learned. Even I'd say mostly emotional knowledge and the emotional maturity that you get after you manage for so long. You realize that there's so many other ways to approach situations, and there's so many sides to situations. Because for me, initially, I wasn't taking time to think about all sides to situations initially. And I think that's a difference in my managing now versus when I first started, when I was in my mid 20s, is I wasn't really concentrating on what could be going on in that other person's life as much, or what's the greater picture besides what I'm seeing. So I'm seeing one thing, and it's okay. We need to enforce this and enforce that as a resolution, but there's less contemplation that should have took place. So I learned
Right.
I had that role, and I fulfilled that role, and I did my best to step up, and I probably did fairly good. But I definitely see differences in who I am today and who I was at that point. There was maturing to definitely occur, and
Yeah.
lessons to learn.
I love that because you bring up a point about, you know, being a leader is not just being given a job title and a function.
Absolutely.
And what it seems like is that at the point that you really felt like you've grown into your leadership is when you had matured into that role and gotten some experience and emotional, improved your emotional intelligence and maturity, and that was probably the moment when you really felt like a leader, not before, in the beginning when you just were given a title.
Exactly. I mean, I wore the title to start with, and it fulfilled the obligations, and I was seen as a leader by others, but inside, I wasn't ready to fulfill being a leader, truly so. And
Right.
I think the difference is, when you're leading staff, how you're leading them, because initially, it's supervisory or it's managerial, but that's not purely leadership. That's a function of the job. That's a function of the hierarchy within the workplace. In leadership, it actually takes on an aspect of hospitality, if you will, because you're also invoking emotions in the other people you're dealing with. And so you're actually needing to develop a lot of soft skills. And of course, we mature as a whole, generationally. And I think that is definitely maturing that's been going on in the past couple generations is the need for greater soft skills in our workplaces.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there an example or a moment that you thought, wow, I've really, a situation came up and you had to address it in an emotionally mature way? Was there like an example of that moment where you really reflected afterwards and thought, wow, I've really grown in that area?
I think the first time I had an insurance company tab me to lead an internal investigation of a workplace, and I was like, okay, this is different. I'm not
Mm,
asking just to be an employee representative. I'm being asked to get full accounts, get details, and be trusted with sensitive information.
mm.
And there's no doing this wrong. I need to step up here, and that was big to me. And it was a incredible trust initiative on behalf of the owners of the company and our insurance company, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a kind of a meaningful moment.
Yes, definitely. So they recognized that you were ready for that responsibility.
And just me, and that shows you who you are to the company, but also shows you what they trust you can do.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, when have you underestimated yourself?
So the position I took, a luxury resort in California, in Shell Beach, I was passed over for that position, and I think this is kind of ironic. And I took that to heart. I was like, okay, I didn't get that job. I'm not fit for the luxury tier hospitality because I came from some all suites mid scale hotels, and I
Mm-hmm.
felt those were nice. And of course, there's different levels of nice. And
Right.
when you're in luxury hospitality, they'll remind you of that. And
Yeah.
I learned a harsh lesson because I interviewed in a polo shirt and slacks, but I didn't have a button down and a tie. And I was passed over for that reason. Well, when I was interviewing, the man who interviewed me ended up not making the cut as a manager at that resort, but his assistant did. And his assistant realized maybe that's not the greatest reason to pass over somebody. And so I felt I was not fit for that job. And so I underestimated myself when really it was just probably a kind of a lousy shortcoming in their hiring policies to say no white button down, no tie, no job. So the assistant actually called me back later on when I absolutely had kind of moved on from the thought, and I was tabbed to join that team. And
Oh,
now I
that's
laugh about it
awesome.
because, in retrospect, how often are we going to pass over somebody for not wearing a tie or a white button down when our hiring has seen such challenges? Like
Right.
now, I am so much more open minded myself than I was when I started. So I'd imagine that would go for
Oh,
most
yeah.
people.
Oh yeah, there's the criteria have definitely changed in the last few years. But you're right. I mean, maybe there's actually something that's good become of that because it causes us to look a little deeper and to really find out, not judge people by their appearances and to really kind of find out who they are as a person and if they're really suitable for the job.
It makes me also think this. Your pool of candidates, if you put too many restrictions and prerequisites, you're thinning that pool out so much and you're depriving yourself of meeting so many people. How
Yeah.
can you say that you really put your best efforts out if you're only going to let yourself see 15 or 20 candidates instead of 160 candidates? So,
Yes.
realistically, getting rid of as many prerequisites as possible and then not having too many ingrained formalities. I'd say even in your employee manual, don't
Right.
make it so someone feel what reads that for their first day and feels absolutely unwelcome because you're
Yeah.
costing yourself workers.
Right. Yeah. And we can't afford to do that this day
Not
and
at all.
age. No, for sure. So, kind of related to the last question about underestimating yourself, what successes and failures have shaped you as a leader?
I remember in successes, I've been tabbed before with transitioning over twice, transitioning workplaces over from one operating system to another, and that moment is always like high pressure, high anxiety, because you're working for weeks on data entry into a brand new system, but you only have one overnight to cross over on audit
Mm,
typically, flipping a switch and hoping your new operating system works perfectly, and that's crazy. It's because if it doesn't work, all these weeks of effort you put in kind of backfire on you. But
right.
thankfully for me, both times, completely seamless transition, which really validates the work you put in and validates the trust of your company to put into you to make sure you got everything from one system to another. So nowadays, you hope your interfaces do this seamlessly, but back in the day, it was just like the purest, heaviest data entry, and
Right.
then actually switching over, shutting one server off and turning another server on.
So, what do you think? I mean, that's pretty awesome because, yeah, technological changes like that can be a nightmare. And what do you think contributed to your success in those smooth transitions?
I, I am moderately tech savvy, so I will say there is definitely a degree of luck. There's no guarantee. Like you flip a switch and hope everything
Right.
goes seamlessly. It is a blessing because you put weeks of work into it. But it's also hard too if you don't have anybody who's feeling as invested as you are. It's a can be a real lonely situation.
Yes. Yeah. I love how humble you are about that success because really what I also hear is that there was a lot of work put into that
Yeah,
preparation
most
and
definitely.
attention to detail and preparation that really brought you to that point to be successful
Absolutely.
and, and realizing that how serious it was and how important it was for that transition to go smoothly. Yeah.
Yeah. In
So
terms
what
of,
a
okay,
yeah, sorry,
sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about failures. What about failures?
In terms of failures, I've had some things that I would consider failures in my career that might just be learning lessons, I would say.
Mhm.
Um, I had an occasion, I was on my last day of a job, and I always kick myself about this. And I was on the tail end of my last shift on my last day of a position, and I didn't have a replacement position. I was actually going to visit workplaces around the United States and travel on my last paycheck to find a suitable next job. Well, I got a call, and this must have been with like the last 2 hours of that job. And it was a developer, and he was asking questions about my surrounding area. Clearly, this developer was intent on building a hotel, clearly in my immediate area, And every question he asked, I had the expertise to answer, but I didn't cross the line of professionalism to give him my name and my number to contact me outside the workplace. And afterward, I was like, I could have ran his hotel.
Yeah.
I absolutely was his guy, and I didn't even put myself forward. So
Right.
I remember for so long thinking what could have been, and I really thought the timing was life's timing for me, and I didn't seize upon it.
Right. Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. That's not necessarily a failure, but recognizing it's a learning moment about recognizing when do you seize the day, seize the
Right.
opportunity, right? Um, but, things work out the way they're supposed to be, and it sounds like you've had a really great career so far with your current work. So, things happen, but you end up somewhere else really good.
True.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think as leaders, we often get tapped into and asked to get involved in a lot of things. And, when do you decide that there's something that you really want to commit to as a leader, or, a project, or it could be a board participating on a committee or things like that? What are your criteria for that?
Yeah, the last two things that have come up for me have been people who've seen me speak on podcasts, or have been following me on LinkedIn, and who've reached out to say, okay, I'm facing this life situation and this work situation, and I need advice. And I've studied their situation, and just with this, no compensation, just what I can do to help better somebody else in our industry. The first one was an Icelandic 12-room property that was inherited by a brother and a sister, and they needed to know kind of where do we go from here. And so I studied the property, and I studied what they could do different, and I kind of involved a lot of things that we can do, or you can do universally, that apply, that don't involve a lot of cost. So, for example, if you didn't want to do cable in every room and have cable TV in every room, you could buy some Chrome sticks and have Chromecast in every room. And it would apply to what the guests had for their own memberships anyway, because they could sign into their own devices. And that way you're
Right.
giving them exposure to plenty of content without incurring much of a monthly bill. And so I also talked to them about, because they said they had a concern about the waiting for the guests as only a team of two. I said, well, you have the advantage of being in Iceland. You could create a waiting area. That's something I know that I've seen your property. Having a nice sitting area can go a long way. You can have a fire pit. You can actually bring them out some hot chocolate, some coffee. They're not going to frown on that waiting experience, because you're
No.
still
Yeah.
providing hospitality. You're providing a moment, a time, and a place. So whether it took 20 extra minutes to get to them, if one of the two of you can check in on them and let them know we're working on this situation, be another 10 minutes, they're going to be so comfortable that what's the difference going to be in the end? They got to enjoy some beautiful scenery. You were still catering to them, and that goes a long way. So all these aspects of their property I study and provide them notes about, answer their questions, and that was fulfilling. And the next one I had was someone who moved up to a director of food and beverage at a very large name property in India, and he was just needing encouragement in the end. There was nothing I said that he didn't already know. There's nothing I said that he didn't already had trained for. He just needed to hear some things back to him that were examples of things he already studied. So I gave him just some bullet points of advice to go forward. And the biggest thing I could tell a lot of people is, when you're hired for or you're offered a promotion, no one's offering you that, or no one is giving you that job because they want you to fail.
Right.
They're giving you those positions because they have faith that you can do that job, and they're giving you that opportunity because they've seen in you something special, and they've seen in you the capability to fulfill that position. So if you're doubting yourself, you should always trust in the fact that that invitation came because someone else saw something special in you. They saw that they could put their faith in you, and that job will be accomplished. So there's no reason you should convince yourself out of it if someone had convinced themselves that you're worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, I that you the word that comes up a lot that you use in how you lead and how you support others is this idea of encouragement. And it comes across with you even in the tone of your voice. Like your tone of your voice carries encouragement. That is so valuable, especially with the world right now and in hospitality. That's what we all need. It's like this warm blanket. So it's so I admire you so much for that.
Thank you.
And it's really important. So the other thing would you say that one of the things that would cause you to use, to help someone out or to lean into a place where you might be able to lead in a different way is when you're able to use your experience and you provide value to someone who, and perspective to someone who might be able to use that.
Yeah, it's for me that's really fulfilling. And that's not just like if I'm tabbed to help give advice to help somebody in their next level of their career, but also just kind of what I'm posting every day on social media. If I post something and it brings an impact out of somebody else, if it betters their day or gives them encouragement or helps compel further thought, I've accomplished my job. That's fulfilling to me. So for me, if I can make somebody else have a great day, and it's just off posting a silly TV clip that I'm chuckling about in my office, I'm like, okay, I'm sharing that with the world today. That's really nice feeling inside to know that it makes a difference in somebody's day.
Yeah. Well, you've definitely done that for me. I responded to one of your recent posts when you posted this great scene from Schitt's Creek.
Oh, it's
Uh,
hilarious.
oh my gosh, I needed that laugh for sure. So thank you for that. You definitely reach your goal with that. So, I think we all have challenges as leaders. We can be really experienced and still come across new things or just need, advice or help from others. If you had a board of advisors and the rest of our listeners were those advisors, for example, what would you tap into them about to get support?
Operational balance is still a challenge for me. No matter how many years I'm in the industry, there are still occasions in which I'll preface this with saying I'm in a university town, and we're a lot of out-of-state students, and there's a blessing
Oh,
and a curse there, because that's my
yeah,
workforce too, and so
right.
often when they're young adults with a degree, they're not staying in the local community. I would love it if they did. It would be absolutely blessing for us. But a lot of them are
Yeah.
heading back to their own states after getting an education at the University of Oregon, which is just a couple miles from me. So after they leave this market, we don't get the exposure to having them as our long term employees. So typically, what we get is enrolled students,
Right.
and the downside of that is they all will come and go at the same times. So it makes it really
Right.
hard schedule wise. And you don't want
Right.
to hire somebody necessarily for those patches, if you will, because you're not going to have hours for them once the students come back. So the
Right.
dynamic is always challenging. Not
Yeah.
having as many graduated young adults or unemployed young adults, and then having in place of that a high degree of students, it can create a lot of operational challenges about who carries the hours in
Mm.
those times that everybody leaves. And you don't want to overuse those same employees who are here and not students, because it's pretty lousy. Admittedly,
Right.
those end up being my utility players and my all stars, and they have done an incredible job of getting me from point A to point B.
Yeah.
But it is a hard balance. Operations and scheduling in
Yeah.
particular can be a hard balance.
Yeah, so it's a challenge. I almost hear two challenges. One is, you know, I mean, I'm jealous the fact that you have a university because we have one sort of close by, but it's not close enough for us to really draw a lot of employees from.
Mm.
But you're right, they're transient. So how do you manage, how do you use them in an appropriate way to fill gaps? But also it's about the fairness and that balance with the people who are there all the time. And how do you manage those two different types of workforces?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you had today everything you needed to succeed, what's a vision that you would pursue for yourself?
Okay, so I would like to step outside of my career on this one to say a vision I'd like to see accomplished if I had all the resources possible. Um, I am a bit heartbroken to see generationally a lot less discussion about the trades and skillcraft.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not seeing as much focus on seeing kids with dreams of engineering and
Mm.
being technicians and mechanics and repair persons. And I think the downside of that and having those jobs having less demand is those occupations are going to cost more in the future, the byproduct of their work, but also it's going to mean less upkeep for a lot of things nationwide, including infrastructure. And I think the resounding solution for that would be, in my opinion, nationally funded, tuition free trade and skill universities. And I would love to see that because you have a need, and we could put money towards that that's going to come back to us tenfold by having those skills retained in the United States. You can't assume that every skill is going to always be here forever, and if generationally the interest isn't there as much. I think that we are kind of seeing some detriment because in the late 60s they had the space race and they had that fascination worldwide that came with that. There are things like that that motivate and stimulate, and I think we need more dreaming and we need more optimism and more interest in things like being technicians, electricians, engineers, repair persons, because in the future, if those occupations see less enrollment, if you will, we're going to see greater costs. And we're
Yeah,
also going to see poor upkeep in terms of our nation and how it runs.
yeah, it's so true. I mean, hospitality has a worker shortage, but we see it in the people that we hire to run our infrastructure. That there's also a major gap in good technicians, and those are really good paying jobs. I
Absolutely.
mean,
And you have greater wait times for basic repairs, or they might just lapse and not get taken care of. You have greater wait times for like a bridge repair, for example.
hmm
And these are critical things if we gave them the priority they deserve. Um, in a tangential relation, I remember our last wildfire season here in Oregon. We were told from the preface it's going to be rougher with less firefighters. And every day on my way to work, I pass signs that say hiring school bus drivers. I remember there were years I didn't see signs that said hiring school bus drivers. And that makes it actually has an impact on how long the school day is. Because if you have less drivers, it's taking them longer to start classes.
right.
Can you
Yeah,
imagine? There's the cause and effect is very direct. And
yeah,
I think that we owe it to ourselves to find a way to make sure that the people who have, even if they don't have that dream, could it give them a new career that could pay them a heck of a lot of money
yeah,
that they
yeah,
didn't have access to in their community?
yeah,
Why not? Why not give people an out if they're in an inner city and they don't feel that they have the opportunities? We can make a difference in that. At the same
yeah.
time, better our country.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really great point. Well, we'll throw that out into the universe. I'm right there with you. I think it's a great one. for sure.
I'm one of these. I'm a type person. I look every day at a bridge that's just a few years old, and I see artwork, and I see engineering, and I see a modern marvel. And I love modern marvels. I love the
Mm-hmm.
things that we can accomplish with great engineering. And I really think we need to aspire to that. And
Yeah.
if it's not me, I'd love to see the next generation have more kids that are aspiring to build those things, to
Right.
design
Yeah.
those things. Because even the architecture, I can marvel at it and know somebody sat there with a pen and a paper and first drew this thing as a sketch. And that's incredible.
Yeah. Well, it's such, that point is too is, how do we inspire again and
Right.
inspire, for so long we've had like a liberal arts education as the gold standard, or a business education as the gold standard, or becoming a doctor or a lawyer. So why are we not talking about these other things that have so much inspiration in them as well? I think that's, and hospitality too. I think that's one of our big problems
Yeah, I've heard a
is
lot of people
we
say we need to regain the luster that we had. And I
yeah.
remember the first time I remember there was a girl I was dating when I first started in hotels, and her sister said, "Oh, he works in a hotel?" And I was like, "Wow, that reaction. You don't hear that much anymore."
No,
Like
it's
no
like now
one's
it's
no
like
one's like, "Wow, hotel."
yeah. No, you work in a hotel? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we need to change that tone, and we need to give people a reason to change that tone. But you're doing a great job with that, because I think a lot of people would be very lucky to be working for you, for
I
sure.
have a great team. I'm glad to have the people around me I do.
Yeah. Well, Dylan, this has been a great conversation. Do you have anything else you want to tell our audience today?
I like to remind people that there's still a war in the Ukraine, and there's still people who are actively providing hospitality there. The 11 Mirrors Design Hotel in Kiev, which is a Marriott affiliated property, I have the pleasure of talking to them many times a week. Katerina has drawn beautiful art. I'll make sure to share it with you, depicting what
Yes,
it's
please
like
do.
to be in that experience firsthand. And they
Mm-hmm.
absolutely have my hope and my dreams for peace for them, because what they're doing when they provide hospitality in a war zone, world class meals, at times using generators, not even with full electricity, and yet they still are delivering the best of hospitality. It's incredible to me, and it's brave, and it is what hospitality is in its finest form. And they're doing it there in a situation where at any time their alarms can go off and they know that there's an air raid, and they're there with their guests trying to calm them down, as well as each other trying to calm one another down as staff.
Mm-hmm.
And so the 11 Mirrors Design Hotel in Kiev, very close to my heart, and I'm very passionate about seeing this war end, because I
Mm-hmm.
think they're absolutely incredible people. But I love what they're doing right now. I'm not. I have the beauty of being able to offer hospitality in a very peaceful setting. They're doing it in a anxiety driven setting, and it's incredible that it's a feat that's accomplished every day there.
Absolutely. Thank you for that reminder and that perspective, because I think we get so focused on our little bubble and we think it's hard the way we operate. Nothing compares to operating under that kind of stress and risk, for their lives and their families, and just the daily, literal fires that they probably have to put out under those circumstances. So thank you.
We associate soldiers with bravery and first responders with bravery, but what they do in terms of offering service and also keeping the society running on a daily basis through it all, and hopefully this isn't years and years that has to be done this way, but that is incredibly brave, and I don't think there's any association with pay that that validates the spirit and the courage that's expressed in what they're doing.
No, absolutely. Yeah, please do send me the link because I would love to look into that more and also put that in
I'd
the
be
show
honored to.
notes. That
We'll
would be
definitely
great.
do so.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dylan. I have enjoyed this conversation so much. I will see you next time. This is Rachel Vandenberg from the Travel Leader Podcast.